to Cross-Platform Podcast, where we discuss how to solve productivity problems across platforms. I'm Augusto Pinat,
And I'm Mark Elwicks.
and today we're doing some housekeeping. There is some old things that we have talked, some tech we are playing with, and we're just going to go and cover those issues
Mhm.
as our episode for today.
Yeah, we've been focusing on some big topics over the past few shows, and there's lots of little bits that have kind of just been floating around the edges. So I figured this is a good opportunity for us to just go through kind of a stream of consciousness, for lack of a better term, stream of semi-consciousness episode, and whatever comes off of the top of my mind and Augusto's mind. And I think where I want to start with this is following up on last week's show. We mentioned a lot about Samsung DeX and using that type of a virtual environment off the phone. And there's a device called a dopesplay, DOPESPLAY, which is basically an exact knockoff of what's a device called a Nextbook, not, well, NEX book. And what it is, it's a monitor and a keyboard with a battery in it that you connect to your phone using either wireless or wired tech. And it allows you to mirror. And if you have a Samsung device, it allows you to run DeX on the display. And we had talked about it last week about this is a great way to do it. And I know Augusto, you have a client who's using
Mhm.
one successfully. So I figured, all right, I've been struggling a little bit with trying to find a device that's going to be lightweight, inexpensive, run around kind of thing. You know, if it dies, it dies. But to be able to do work on it. So I figured, all right, I'll get one of these. I got it.
Didn't
It's
work.
going back. Yeah, it's going back. Now, I want to explain why, though. Some of the things are its fault, some of the things are not its fault. And it's one of those perfect storm situations that for me, this particular device is not going to cut it. Or at least, yeah, it's not going to cut it. And here's why. Let's start off with what is actually its fault. The device itself has a very nice display on it, has a decent keyboard. The one that I got was about $270, and it is a wired only connection. So you have to plug in a USB-C cable to it. The upside is it will charge your phone while it's plugged in through USB-C.
Mhm.
It does a very nice display of the desktop. Those are the positives. The negatives are that charging of your phone is slower than molasses in January in Canada. It is painfully slow. Now, I know it's partially because you're drawing power off of the device itself and you're actually using the phone at the time, but still, it's really it's enough to keep the phone from draining, but it's not enough to bring it up over any period of time. Second, the keyboard itself is okay. It's fine. It's passable. The trackpad is iffy at best. There is no palm rejection on this trackpad. So if you're using the keyboard and your hand just glances across it, your mouse is off and running and you're typing somewhere else on the screen. Third, and I think the thing that bothers me the most about it isn't the device itself. It's some of the things that I've read about the business practices of Dopesplay as a company, and specifically how they've been generating reviews about their products. They've been accused of a lot of astroturfing for getting positive reviews about their products. And if you look at their device, it is almost an exact copy of the Nextbook, which is the one that kind of originated this idea.
Right.
Dopes Play's wireless device is almost $400. The Nextbook wireless one is the same price as the low end Dopes Play, and it has apparently much better options. So I would say that in a form factor or as a functioning device, the Nextbook would be the better option to not bother with the dope display. However, I'm still not going to get it. And here's why. This is where the challenge comes in. Because the application I've been using, OneNote, doesn't work really well on the web. It doesn't provide the same functionality. And this is something I want to talk about later in the show. It is best on a Windows device. That's where it has the most functionality. Well, this is not a Windows device. Dex is not Windows. Dex isn't even Chromium, so it doesn't have a full browser experience. So it became a very awkward user experience. OneNote Android, the Android app, is way down on the list on a tablet. And that's what this thing considers it to be. So it's a bad combination of functionality that I needed that this cannot meet the end result. So where does this take me? Where is this wound up? What would I recommend? If somebody wanted to try this, I would absolutely say try it. See if it works for you. See if it works the applications that you use. Get a next book. Don't get the dopesplay. The only thing that is enticing people about the dopesplay, I'll be honest with you, is the fact that you can get it through Amazon and you have Amazon's return policy. So you can send it back. You cannot get a next book through Amazon. You have to go direct to next book to get that. But the bigger problem is, and this is what I really want to get into, is that this entire exercise was derailed by my choice of application, not by platforms.
Correct.
Because if my application choice had been something like Notion that's completely browser based, we would be having a much more nuanced conversation over this. The downsides would be much smaller because of that particular platform. And that's one of the things that I think we have to think about, building on last week's conversation, is your choice of productivity tool needs to include not only the hardware, but the software and how that software is going to be implemented across your hardware selections. I need the information to be available on my phone, on my tablet, on my portable, on my main laptop, on my field laptop. It has to be the same information across. I have features and functionality I have to have across those. Well, can't do that. I don't have that with the choices that I've made. So I'm literally having to change choices right now and rework some of my structure to be able to provide need set. But I just wanted to use an illustrate people. It's very easy to look at something and say, hey, this could be a very viable solution. And then finally do what we say all the time, which is try it, evaluate it, measure it against your success criteria. And if it fails, let it fail early. Don't get too far down in the well. Fail fast, move on to the next,
And
and
move
then don't
on.
be
Correct.
concerned about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because we discussed that device, and I said I wasn't going to discuss it on today's show, but I will. I've been, I'm starting to work into research into what Apple Vision Pro will do for productivity. Given my world is Apple, and I most likely will get one of those, and so I'm studying how these VR, AR are going to affect, if they are going to affect productivity. So in the same way you test the dopesplay, I test a couple of VR glasses. One was the X Real. There is basically three players in the market: X Real, Rocket, and Virtual. I tried the X Real. I didn't like it. There were two big deals for me. One is where I think Apple have a big chance to win. What I have learned about this is not the glasses, it's the software. So the X Real connects with the Mac, connects with the PC, or connects with the iPads. Okay. But when they connect to those, they treat it as an external monitor. Okay. The X Real has a software for the Mac, will allows you to create multiple virtual, but it's very buggy. So I wasn't really able to work hours. The other thing that bothers me is I have these glasses and I have three virtual screens in here, but I still seen the other screen. And what I want to
Mm,
have, I don't want to have that. I want just to have the other, just that. Turn off the other monitor. So
mhm.
the virtual, I'm still waiting for one accessory, but the accessory will allow me to connect to my phone or the iPad and then turn that into a pointing device to these virtual screens. So I will report more on this when I have it. The other thing that happened since our last thing was the upgrade of iOS 17 and iPad 17. We did on Personal Productivity Club an installation party in case you had questions. So that was a fun thing to do. Um, but as you said, one of the things that came out of that party was that question. How this software was going to affect my productivity. How this is now that this
Mhm.
new software will allow me to connect microphones, to connect cameras to an iPad. Okay, is that make the iPad more prone for you to use? What are the applications that you use? Can you really move them to the iPad or not? And it will depend on a case for case. In most cases, the answer will be yes, but it is that. What is, that application that you need, and what is the productivity reality of that?
Yeah, it's fascinating as we look at this being announcement season, for lack of a better term. Uh, and we look at companies starting to bring this stuff out. Apple announcing their updates on iOS 17. Microsoft is coming up supposedly on the 21st with their announcement events. All the rumors are talking about new Surface laptops and new, potential new Surface devices and that form factor. Uh, this is again what complicates this idea of cross-platform, and it's not the hardware, it's the software. Because if you start to use, and Microsoft is, I'll say, they're the culprits in this one, because they're the ones who have the biggest productivity footprint out there. I mean, it's bigger than Google's and everybody else's because of their business footprint. But when you start using their desktop applications and all the functionality that's in there, you can't use them on anything else. You have to use them on Windows-based devices. So you wind up starting to say, okay, I'm limited now into what I have available to me from a hardware perspective. And that becomes challenging. And when you look at things like their announcements coming up where they bring new Surfaces out or new Surface laptops, you're still basically talking Windows laptops. It may be a tablet form factor or something like that, but you're still talking about that same type of device. So you're not really leaving that when you think about a true cross-platform environment.
Mhm.
Part of that, and this is one of the things that I think we've kicked into significantly as of late, and we just started something new, and I want you to talk about it. We created a new group in the personal productivity channel or club.
And we create a new channel, and the new channel name is Microsoft Productivity. It was inspired on Art, and I will be active there. Art as more expert on Microsoft than me, but the reality is it's a place to go and talk about Microsoft and how to use it for productivity. Most of us use Excel or Word or Teams or Outlook. So even if you use it on the iOS, it's still a Microsoft software. So um, there is a new group in Personal Productivity Club where you can go and talk about what is working for you or what is not. Are you
Mhm.
using OneNote, but you have Dropbox and you now don't know where your documents is? Fine, let's talk. You use OneNote and you have discovered that OneNote on your Mac or your PC looks different than your phone. Yes, let's discuss about that and let's find how we can help you with those solutions.
Yeah, it's not intended to be a this is how to use Microsoft Word kind of place. This is when you're creating the productivity part of this is how do I use the Microsoft ecosystem to get my work done? And if you're familiar with the Microsoft ecosystem, you know that in every app, there's usually 3 or 4 ways to get something done. And there's usually 3 or 4 ways to get it done across multiple apps. So there's lots of options, none of which are necessarily better than the others. It really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And that's what we want this group to be focused on, is this open discussion around, this is the work I'm trying to get done. What are some ideas as to ways to get it done? Perfect example, we talk about note taking all the time. Well, within the Microsoft ecosystem, taking notes in OneNote is kind of a given, as that's their approach, to the point where it's being built into other applications. So Teams has OneNote connections built into it. Well, that's great. But now there's also a thing called Microsoft Loop, which looks like Notion, which helps you take notes. And you can still take notes in Word. So where's the best place to do it? That's
Correct.
the conversation. Yeah, that's the
And
conversation. Not what buttons to click, but where should I be doing this and why should I be doing it there?
correct. One of the most common questions I get is, should I put the to do is the task in the projects or in Outlook or Microsoft To Do, and
Yeah.
why? Okay, and there is not a simple answer to those questions, but that is the kind of things we are looking to discuss: what has worked, what hasn't worked, and go
Mhm.
from there.
Yeah, there's a lot of those and the thing that's interesting too, especially if you're a solo person or you're a small business, or small enterprise, and you're using Microsoft 365,
Mhm.
that opens a whole new set of conversations, because there's a ton of functionality in there that most people don't use, and that functionality changes where you're using it. So you wind up getting pigeonholed into things just because you're using a particular feature, and you're unable to use that feature in other places and other platforms. I guarantee at some point the conversation will circle around trying to use a Mac with Microsoft land. Well, that's a headache and a half. Why? Because Microsoft has never truly given Mac a fair shake on the platform.
Right.
So and I admit that. I totally admit that. I mean, I'm a Microsoft fanboy forever, but I'm also a Philadelphia sports fan, which means we love you, but we're also kick you in the shins every other day just to make sure you're staying honest.
I
So,
didn't know that. That explained why you and I work so well.
oh, yeah, this
I
is.
am a Rockies fan and will be a Rockies fan forever.
So, the last thing I wanted to get into, and this is kind of the bigger topic for today, is one of the things that I've struggled with over the past week or so as I've tested the dopesplay and tested using um, Dex again, revisiting it yet again to see if I can streamline and optimize, because my work environments have changed and I never quite know where I'm going to be at any given time. Comes to the challenge, what do you do when your favorite tool that you're using isn't truly a cross platform tool? Now, some of them are. Some of them are very friendly and happy with that. So, for example, Todoist. Great example of a very cross platform tool. Its applications work well, regardless of the device. The browser interface is very similar to the desktop application interface. You have a very nice experience. Equivalent, honestly, Microsoft To Do does a good job, runs in the multiple platforms, browser and desktop. Again, nice thing. But what do you do
Yeah,
with a
same
tool that
thing with
doesn't?
Nusby, but what happened with Scrivener, for example? Scrivener is what I
Scr-
used to write.
Yeah.
Okay, you can find it on the iPad, you can find it on the Mac, you can now find it on Windows. It is the same, it's very close, but it's not. And I use another software to write called Ulysses. That's Mac
Hmm.
only or Apple only. Okay, it will synchronize with the Mac and the iPad, but it will not get out of that ecosystem. So is that kind of software relevant or critical enough for you to use it in your cross platform? When you look Outlook, Outlook
Oh,
changed from Mac to PC to iPad to phone. Okay. So that's part of the problem.
And that's one of the things I think we need to consider very carefully when we look at this deeper evaluation of our systems is the fact that if we're going to be in a truly cross-platform environment where as much work will be done in a browser as it will on a mobile device, as it will on a desktop device, then there has to be ubiquitous environment interfaces. There has to be functionality that crosses those boundaries. Well, that premise narrows the field very rapidly of applications that you can use. And I'll go back to what has catalyzed a lot of this for me as of late, my current frenemy, OneNote,
Mhm.
because if I am working on a Windows desktop with the desktop version of the application, it's great. It's got everything I need. It does all kinds of great stuff. As soon as I leave that little island, the functionality falls by the wayside, which is very problematic. I can still access the information I need to, but I can't do it in the ways that I can in that one particular version of the application. Which means if that's going to be the center of my world, I can only choose devices that are going to allow me to replicate the center of that world. And that's, to me, that's not acceptable anymore. That won't cut it. And I think that's one of the reasons why you look at tools like a Notion that can do a lot of the same things, but not all of them, but it's much more cross-platform. But here's a perfect example of where you wind up having to give up things. Moving from OneNote to Notion, I have to give up digital ink. Notion doesn't support it in any way, shape, or form. The only way I can do digital inking is if I use a tool like Samsung Notes now or Squid or something like that, capture my notes and then dump them out as a PDF file or as an image and put them into Notion. But I don't have searchability now. Whereas in OneNote, I could search based on the handwritten text. So you can see this dilemma that you start to get into. If I'm going to go down this handwritten environment,
Mhm.
great. I want that functionality. That means there's a whole slew of tools I can't use. And where I started to run again into this challenge is when I went to my tablet to go through and start doing my handwriting on OneNote. I'm like, cool, this is great. I can do this. But as soon as I started to put regular text on the same page, the flaw in the design showed up because the text would move down the page, but the inked copy would not. It would just sit in the same spot. So the text would move down behind it, which made the functionality useless. I couldn't do typed text and handwritten text on the same page in the tool. This is a functional failure that precludes the ability of this tool now to be used in the environment that I need. There was a time before where it was totally fine. I could use that all the time, but I can't. Not anymore. Not with this combination of decisions that I've made. So when we look at something like what tool you're going to make as the center of your world for each of your major things. I mean, we always talk about the big three: notes, tasks, and calendar. Whatever tool you're going to choose for each of those three, you need to make sure it's going to work in every place that you need it to and on the devices that you need it to with the features that you need it to.
Mhm.
That's a pretty complicated exercise.
No, no, it is. And that's where you need to be very clear into what is those devices and what they mean. As a person who loves to play with software, I need to be very clear what is what I need and what is what I want. And as you said early on the show, test early and get rid of it. But in order for that to work, there is two things. One, you need to be very clear what you want out of this device.
Mhm.
Okay. And then you need to have a very clear criteria. One of the biggest issues I found many times is people say, well, but it cost me $200. Doesn't matter. If you have that criteria clear, return it.
Mhm.
Okay. Don't hang into the device because it cost you $100 or more. Have that criteria before you make the purchase. So that way you can test it, check, 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 check. If you discover more uses, great. But at least need to make those basic ones. Otherwise, they should need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the type of thing that I cannot stress enough that will break your systems.
Mhm.
And it's frustrating because you usually don't catch it until you have a significant investment in one combination of hardware and software. You get to a point it's like all of a sudden, I can't do what I need to do. Or worse, and this also happens very often, one of the tools, usually software, changes and the functionality changes.
Right.
And now it does work or it doesn't work or whatever. And I'll go back to again OneNote, perfect example. For the longest time, you could run the OneNote Android application on Chromebooks. Well, sometime last year, they decided, nope, can't do that. You can only run it in the browser. Well, that was fine up until that point. I could use it to do digital linking on a Chromebook. It was a nice combination, but now all of a sudden that functionality just died. So what did I do? What did I have to do? I had to change immediately.
Right.
This is why we also always talk about having an exit plan with your applications. And sometimes it's very difficult to find an application that has a clean exit plan. So, what I want people to take away from this is it is a worthwhile investment in your time to stop, go back, and look at your system from above and say, okay, can I do what I need to do in all the places I need to do it when I need to do it? And
Mhm.
I say this all the time. Productivity is about doing the right things at the right times in the right ways. This is exactly the situation that you have to look at yourself in. And I use my example of myself right now all the time. I have information across multiple projects that I've got to keep together, and I never know when I'm going to have to call that information up and
Right.
act on it. And it literally can be bounced back and forth. So I may be at my desk like I am now and have access to all my resources. I may be at my dining room table with my field laptop and working there, which has some of the resources, but not all. I may be on my tablet. I may be on my phone sitting, standing in line at the grocery store. Do I have access to the same information I need to be able to do things? Or, and this is something that I'm curious how you handle these situations. If you're using an application that does not have equal functionality, and you can't do something where you are, how do you put that thing or that action on hold until you can? What do you do with that?
So, and I can give you examples of that. Okay. I do 95% of what I do on the iPads. Okay. There are things, for example, we were talking about Oktoberfest before, and I part of one Oktoberfest in our community, and they needed a video. Okay. The video was running Camtasia on the MacBook. So when we created a video, and there was an error on one of the images
Mhm.
that I needed to fix. So if I have, okay, I don't have it configured on all my iPads to access remote to the MacBook. Why? Because not all the iPads has the same resolution. So when I access to some of the other machines, it messed up with the max resolution, and then I need to work
Mhm.
and fix it again. Therefore, I only access to one. So I if I don't have the iPad that I needed to do that, then I capture in Todoist or Nozbe, depending which side of my world is. Okay. And that is an example. If I can solve it right there, then I will access remotely. But there are moments where clients come and say, hey, I'm having this issue with my Windows machine. I don't
Mhm.
carry a Windows machine. That requires me to get home, get into the MacBook, turn on the Windows, and try to replicate the issue. So the best I can do is capture and then try to get back to that as soon as I can.
Yeah, that's where I run into that problem as well, where you'll be working on something and it happens on my phone all the time. I'll be out and I need to capture a bit of information or look up something or modify something. And you have to kind of plan in advance to say, okay,
Mhm.
worst case scenario, I need to be able to do this from the least capable device I have. Can I do that? And that's actually an excellent question that we should be asking ourselves. We should take some time to rank the capability of our devices. What is the most capable? What is the least capable? And it goes back to something that you use all the time and we've talked about frequently, which is your technology card,
Mhm.
to be able to say, this thing that needs to be done can be done on these devices. And that's with this software on these devices. And that's it. It can't be done anyplace else. So it's really critical to be able to understand the scope of that. And the reason why I say it's critical is because for me, it becomes a rabbit hole. It's like, oh, can I find a way to do this thing on this least capable device that honestly I should not be trying to do there? And that's a lot of what triggered the Dex dopesplay rabbit hole that I got into over the past 2 weeks, spending unnecessary amounts of time trying to do things on there that I really should have just said, no, it's just not going to work here. I have to stop it and move on. That is an easy rabbit hole to fall into. We Most people will get into that challenge a lot where they start to say, oh, okay, I don't have to do this here. I have my tablet. I want to try and do everything through my tablet. Well, yeah, you might be able to, but I'm willing to bet there's some things you're not going to be able to, and have a plan as to how you're going to handle those when you can't.
Well, and I can give you another example. Okay. If you work with large sheets of Excel, okay, no, it doesn't happen every time. It doesn't happen every day. Once in a while, I have a big sheet of Excel that came my way that I need to work with now. When that happened, I don't want to do that on the iPad. Okay. I want to do that in the Mac. I want to open Excel and do it in the Mac. Again, can you do that? Do I need that every day? No. But
Mhm.
when I need it, I want to have that ability. One of the things that excites me about this idea of the glasses or the Apple
Mhm.
Vision Pro is that is are the platform allow me to be more effective? Yes or no? And it's okay. And for me, it's not a matter. I mean, it sounds great. I don't watch TV, so TV and gaming are not my thing. I watch so little TV that is really not a
Mhm.
not an issue. Okay, I want to know. Okay, can I create these environments to do the work I do better? Okay,
Mhm.
I'm testing the glasses. Okay, why? Well, because these glasses technically give you a massive screen. Okay, do that means having that virtual massive screen, I will be able to write longer. I will be able to do what I do on a
Mhm.
longer time and better. Okay, why? Well, because I am remote a lot of the time. As you said, you have your transition laptop. If I can now move my transition things to lighter things, that's a win. So, but
Yeah.
there is a set of very specific criterias when we do the episode about the glasses. I will share it that are part of this test. It's not just, oh, let me get the new gear and see. It
Mhm.
is what is that criteria that need to happen for me. So one of the things for me is you need to have the ability at least to have 3DFS. And what is called 3DFS is that you can set the screen in a place. So if you move your head, that screen doesn't move. Okay.
Mhm.
Why? Because otherwise, then I use the screen that I have. The second thing I want is privacy. Okay. If I'm in a plane, Okay. I'm really looking forward to put the glass and have a massive screen that I can work without the guy next to me reading what I'm writing. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's if your hardware doesn't meet those two criterias, then need to go back. Okay. And the X Real already went back. I'm testing the new one. I'm waiting for an adapter. Perfect. Okay. So, but those criterias need to have ahead of time. It's not by the hardware. It's what is the criteria that you need to make that happen.
It's interesting you talk about that one big screen and the typing aspect and all. Um, I notoriously am not a touch typist. I kind of fumble my way through, but I fumble fast. 50 words a minute, but I have to be able to,
Right.
out of my peripheral vision, see the keyboard. So in my previous experiments, briefly with VR goggles in their early days, where they would completely close you off to the outside, I'm like, well, I can't see the keyboard, so I can't type. It's going to be, I don't know what words are going to go in here. So when you start to look at those glasses and that and having maintaining your peripheral vision around but still having the display, that to me is a positive. That to me would be advantageous to be able to have that display functionality.
Well, funny enough, that's one of the things I'm struggling right now. The X Real bring, a cover, and this one's doesn't. So at least during the day, I will need to play it with it at night. It's too bright and it's get too distracted the background for me. So
Mhm.
I was exactly looking into the accessory to accomplish the dark, but I
Huh.
can't touch type. So that and maybe the answer is I don't need the full thing, but I need maybe something that give me half. So the
Mhm.
part of the screen is dark and the part under I still can see. I don't know. Again, I will continue playing with the test. I will add that
It's
to the list, even that it's
it's
not mine, so I can
fascinating.
report.
It's fascinating because that's one of those accessories that will not make or break your systems. It'll enhance
Mhm.
your system, uh, but it doesn't change the software that's involved. It doesn't, for the most part, change the hardware that's involved. It's like getting a better keyboard, it's like getting a better mouse, and it's getting a better monitor. It's that class of improving the experience, but it won't, short circuit the overall experience.
Right.
So I'll be very interested to see how that goes for you and as you carry that forward, what works well for you, what doesn't work, and
Right.
is it worth something to
And
consider?
I will see because he will give me, I want to test what is in there before we get to the Vision Pro. I have clients who are going to get the Vision Pro for the coaching. So I want the same thing. They want the answers for the iPad. I'm sure they will be
Mhm.
looking for answers on the Vision Pro. And what I want is to be able to explain what are the advantages, testing what is before, what is coming with the Vision Pro, and what will come after that. So
Yeah, I've been as part of this exercise of trying to find I have an older Asus laptop that I use as my field machine. And it does a decent job. I mean, the thing's been around since 2015. It chugs. It still runs Windows 11. I put a new battery in it. It's lightweight, decent screen. It does a good job as a Windows machine. However, I've been trying to find something that would be a viable companion to it, same size, same approximate weight. Uh, so I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'll look at a Chromebook. Well, they killed off the Chromebook that I like because they won't update it anymore. So even though
mhm,
that completely usable Chromebook. So looking at other ones, I'm like, yeah, they're thicker, they're not. So I keep going back into the tablet space because I have an S8 Plus. And I look at the newer S9 Samsung tablets. I'm like, wait a second. The S9 Plus is a 12.9-inch display with a keyboard cover. It's pretty darn close to the size of laptop that I'm looking at.
right.
The hardware form factor lends itself to it. The pricing on a trade-in is very interesting. It's very, very reasonable, very attractive, but it's not a Windows device. So I go back to our beginning of our conversation with this is like, now I need to make sure if that's a hardware option that's going to work out really well for me. And I have found the ability to grab and go with this tablet recently has been extremely useful because I have a keyboard cover with it as well. It's worth changing some of the other aspects of my platform to facilitate that because the hardware itself is working well enough for this option.
Right.
So I'll be curious to see, and I think where this really comes down to, and everybody should be thinking about this, is that our systems are not static. Our systems are constantly evolving. Not only is technology changing, but our need sets are changing. Our demands on those are changing. And we have to be willing to say at some point, you know what, I just can't use this particular tool right now. I
Correct.
may come back to it another point in the future, but right now, what I'm doing does not warrant me putting the exercise and the effort into implementing that hardware software solution.
Yep. And that is very, very, very important to remember that and use that as a guidance when you want to do these things.
Mhm.
Yep. So with this, we get to the end of the show. And, again, if you use any Microsoft product, join in Personal Productivity Club, the Microsoft Productivity channel. But in the meantime, follow us where you like to listen to podcasts, like us or subscribe to us and leave us a review. You can also interact with us in personalproductivity.club. We have a channel for cross-platform. So we are Gusto Pinot and our GoWix. See you next time from your favorite device. Thank you.